Coming up, kids are off school for the foreseeable future. How are parents going to cope? Kate Llewellyn has more details on that. We'll talk to Sonia Hutton-Taylor in detail about the coronavirus and what the medical experts currently know about it. Lucy Sloan-Williams talks to us about those of us who have the responsibility to care for others and how we can still do that with the coronavirus restrictions in place. And Susie from Bloom in Overton High Street will be telling us how the High Street is coping and the new ideas our shops and services are coming up with. And we'll talk to Earl Robinson about an amazing new idea, and it's a project called Overton Cares, helping us all as more and more of us are required to stay indoors. Welcome to Overton.tv. So the schools have closed for the time being, but they are allowing some pupils in on Monday. Kate Llewellyn has more on this.
Following the government advice earlier in the week, it has been decided that from today all schools will be shutting from Friday at then sort of normal closing time, so 3:30 for Overton. And as far as we know, that applies to all school children except for those whose parents are key workers or those children considered to be vulnerable.
So mums have children at home now, and I know you've been kind of following the groups a bit on social media around Overton, and there's already been some discussion about how they're going to fill their time.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been really interesting actually following the social media buzz, and particularly like what's happening on Facebook, because you get real extremes of parents obviously really worrying about continuing their children's education and what they can be doing at home in terms of keeping up with what the children would have been doing at school. But equally, I think it's been really interesting to see that a lot of mums are going, hang on, this isn't about, just about schooling. It's about taking advantage of having the time with our children, perhaps doing different things that they wouldn't do at school, whether it's baking, whether it's washing the car, whether it's getting out in the garden, going out into the woods more than they ever would. And I think that's been really lovely. For mums who are worried, I would certainly recommend, if you're not part of the MOOS Facebook group, which is a horrible name, I think, but stands for Mums of Overton, do follow on there, because there's been lots of lovely discussions, there's been lots of sharing of ideas and lots of support. And more than that, actually, MOOS is just a great place for, buying and selling, which again, at these sort of difficult times, funny things like that can really, really help you out, whether it's swapping toys, whether it's, as I say, swapping ideas, swapping support. And obviously for those mums that are not only having to stay at home with their children, but are also in self-isolation, it's a great place to ask for help with getting, whether it's food deliveries or anything else that you need at the moment.
I suppose also it would be great to hear from parents if you're sitting with your child and there's lots of conversation. It'd be great if you can contact us, and if you've got any ideas of things that you're getting up to, ways that you're educating the children, or even games or things you're making. It'd be great if you could contact us and tell us about it, and we can tell everybody else. Just contact us via the website at Overton.tv. There are other suppliers in the village who are providing food, and informally, they're all saying supply lines are fine. It's all fine. We've got plenty of food, and it's all coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing, again, just to go back to social media, is that we're being told that independent places like Wilson's, like Turner's, the Butchers, Wilson's being the Greengracers, as well as actually the local cafes and restaurants and takeaways, do have food, do have supplies. So there's no reason not to take advantage of many of them who are offering delivery services. Us mums need our coffee.
Now, we did invite the co-op to come and chat to us. However, they were unavailable and have sent us a statement, and you can read this statement on our links section of the website at Overton.tv. Now, Sonia Hutton-Taylor runs a medical forum for doctors who are looking for a career change, and also she runs Burnout Geese for the rest of us who are burnt out in our careers. And I started talking to her about the stress and burnout that's existing in the NHS right now.
Well, I think there's been a very high proportion of burnout in the NHS anyway before the coronavirus. I think what the coronavirus has done is it's distracted everybody from their burnout. So they're in sort of crisis mode and probably not thinking that much about themselves and just sort of going on sort of like an autopilot.
Talk me through what we know the virus is and what we think we know it's going to do.
Before I go any further, I should say that I ceased clinical practice 30 years ago. So although my medical knowledge is reasonably up to date, I have been following all of the postings on various medical and health websites. So I'm quite up to date with it all, but I think I should just make that clear as well.
Yeah.
The symptoms are primarily high fever and a cough. Some people might get a sore throat, some people might feel a bit sickly. So a general flu-like illness with a very high temperature and a persistent cough, almost from day one. Where it's different is in that it is I suppose really a very, very, very nasty flu. So you can imagine a flu season and the worst flu you've ever had, probably times 3, that's how it'll be, which for most people is going to be easily recoverable from. You will feel pretty rubbish for a few days, and like any viral illness, it takes a few weeks to recover from it fully in terms of getting your energy back. And you might also be still what we call shedding the virus for a number of weeks afterwards. So just because you start to feel all right doesn't mean to say you can't still spread it.
So what's the latest evidence on how doctors and scientists think that this is spreading?
Right, well, it's all happening so fast that information is always looking back in retrospect, isn't it? And then there are various scientific models you can use to predict what's going to happen. So I've been plotting the number of cases on a graph just for my own interest. And there was some talk at an earlier stage a few weeks ago that the rate of infection was doubling every 5 or 6 days. And on my graph, it looks like 2 days. So either I plotted it wrong, or they're wrong, or it has in fact changed and things just haven't updated sufficiently. So I think it's quite difficult to keep on top of information that is changing as rapidly as it is. The current information is if you're in a position to self-isolate, do. If you are vulnerable, do your best to self-isolate.
And what are we classing as vulnerable people?
Over 70s, people under 70 who have coexistent illnesses. So somebody could be vulnerable at 45 if they have severe asthma, for example, or if they're a very heavy smoker, because if your lung capacity is already partially compromised, it means that when you get a very bad flu, my smoking friends, they nearly always had the most awful chest infection with concurrent and with their flu. But one of the difficulties with this particular virus is that it has an incubation period of, they're saying 7 days, but some scientists are saying 14, which means that you can have the virus in your body for a number of days, however many it is, which is not entirely clear, before you start getting any symptoms. And this is true for the common cold. So, in the day before you start sneezing with your common cold, you are full of virus. So, in fact, it is possible with viruses to be infective before the actual symptoms become really, really obvious.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Don Antonio. Really appreciate your time on that. That's lovely. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Nice to speak to you, Darren.
Self-isolation doesn't always mean you just look after yourself. Some people have an elderly partner or relative to take care of. And one of those people is Lucy Sloan Williams, who looks after a parent. Now, her mother is still able to live independently, but still requires some help. So I talked to Lucy about the extra challenges of keeping her mum well during this outbreak.
It's very difficult because my mother lives a half an hour away, and I know that some others have their parents too far away for them to help, but at least she is half an hour's drive. I've decided to visit her twice a week. That way I can monitor everything in the house, just in case, food shortage or anything like that. There are certain things I know she needs, so I have to get those ordered in place so that I can deliver them on time. The key part for her is self-isolation. And I told her no one is to step over the threshold except for me. She has taken this on board, which is amazing because she will be 90 this coming May.
Wow.
And she really, really has got the message.
Do you drum in any new routine with regards to hygiene?
Hands routine. Now, I mean, most people's idea of washing hands is a quick flick under the sink. No, the various stages of washing your hands to make sure you go in between the fingers, okay? And you give it a really good rub, and then again like so, and you clean your thumbs, okay? And make sure your wrists are clean, and 20 seconds, we've been told, and I think it's happy birthday would do it, to any person's name that you choose. So, but I'm going to actually demonstrate that to her today, and I'm going to get her to show back to me. So she's got that routine, because that's the critical one, I think.
Lucy Sloan-Williams there. Now, we're lucky with having quite a few independent shops in our high street, but that can mean that they are more vulnerable to changes in the economy. So I asked Susie about how she thought Overton retailers were holding up.
For all of us, it is a big change, and it's come about very, very quickly. And so to keep on our toes, we are having to think what kind of strategy we can apply to our business to be still helping people in the community in the ways that we are used to, but also thinking outside the box and thinking out some good curveball ways in which we can meet the demands for things where there is demand.
With your shop looking to do stuff online, and also the cafe next to you looking to do deliveries.
Deliveries and takeaways, because they can't have people on the premises, and they want to minimise contact with people. And also people who are at home are, looking for things that they can do. There's lots of opportunities. I mean, some of the things that we've carried out through Little Balloons, which was an preschool hour story and craft on a Tuesday morning each week, I've always been really resourceful with materials on that. So, for example, we made plant pots out of newspaper, and we were able to plant vegetable seeds that can grow. That was one example, newspaper or any paper, instead of having to have have some of the things that you would need to go out and buy from a shop. So I can certainly do tutorials and all sorts of different things. And I enjoy doing that because it's also contact time for me with all the people that I love who've been coming to Bloom since we've been open. And I can also look at there's a lot of deliveries going on, so I can look at doing craft kits for people. So that they can. I had an inquiry yesterday about this, so that people can do little hampers where people can have all the materials that they might want to make something. And I can offer stories online. I can offer other workshops that will give people ideas and help us along the way through the virus protocol.
Fantastic. Well, I really look, if you get any ideas that you really start to take off, do come back and let us know. I'd love to hear what you've got, and maybe we'll get you to do some examples of some of the stuff you've come up with. It'd be great to see that.
Okay, and I'm sure you'd love to hear, Darren, as well, from anybody who might like to create a segment for the TV, such as, I was talking to some musicians yesterday who have linked up with musicians in Italy who've been playing during the kind of curfew, as it were, through their windows to other people, and people have been opening up their windows to listen. So people are seeing and still engaging with people that they're not seeing and engaging with, that they know from the village, would be also a nice thing, I'm sure.
So, Susie, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Darren.
And if you run a business, tell us how you're holding up. Maybe you're changing what you do massively. We'd love to hear from you about any new ideas you've come up with while we have these restrictions in place. And if you're musical, well, feel free to send in a video of you performing. The email address for both of those is darren@overton.tv. Now, as more and more people around the village are required to self-isolate, there can be a real need to have someone nearby who is well to help when leaving the home is impossible. Now, I spoke to Earl Robinson about a new collaborative project that is currently being put in place around the village of Overton.
We're a small group of people from the Overton churches together, started to think, how could we respond to this crisis? This one's not overseas. It's not in an impoverished area. It's right here on our front door. And so we asked the question, how could we assure that every person in the village is cared for during this important time and difficult time? So by connecting with the OBA and with Parish Council, Open Overton, local voluntary sector, we devised a plan for how to cover the whole village in care. And that happened really, really quickly earlier this week.
What's the service that you're going to provide to help people, whilst they're in their homes?
I think probably the number one service that will come out of this is everybody in the village, everybody in a home knowing that there's someone who's looking after them.
Just tell me how you're doing that.
We've devised a plan where registered volunteers will be given a street, and it may be the street they live on. It depends how many people volunteer from their street, or it may be a different street within the village. And they'll have a number of houses on that street, or part of the houses on that street, that they'll be responsible to check in on. That may be a knock on the door. Hey, are you okay? Is there something you need? That may be a phone call if we get to a point where no one's allowed to go outdoors. Of course, we don't know what we're facing. If it's a conversation through a window with someone who's isolated and simply needs someone to talk to, because we realize the whole mental health aspect of this is going to really be difficult for people as well. And it may be going into the village to pick up an item, if that's what it is, or some other kind of delivery that might need to happen. But essentially, it's the idea that a street volunteer will have on their minds those around them as well, which I think we do anyway, but we're trying to organize it to the point where no one gets left out here in the village. The
question that people will be asking is that if, because these symptoms don't show for a few days, there's a chance that you could have a street volunteer out there who's delivering items and giving items, and unbeknownst to them, they could be having symptoms. So how are you mitigating and helping to prevent any transmission of infection?
Firstly, we're not asking them to go into houses. So it's not a knock on the door, walk in and see how your neighbor's doing, sit down and have a cup of coffee. It's from outside. And if there's a delivery that would come through, if it's small, it would come through the letterbox, or it would be a knock on the door and left outside. Anything that we would be delivering, I think, will be delivered with the use of gloves, as we've been either purchased or been given a large amount of those for each volunteer to have some. We also will probably be having a little disinfectant. We are looking at how we will help people if there is a need for something that needs to be picked up further afield, whether that's driving to Andover to the shop to get a whole number of deliveries all at once or something like that. Again, we don't know exactly what we face here, but what we're not asking volunteers to do is to go into houses. We are asking them to show care for the people in the houses.
If someone wants to help and volunteer, where should they go? Where can they find you?
If you want to register as a volunteer, it's so easy. You go to overtoncares@gmail.com, and when you plug that into your machine, you then put in the subject line your address, because we're trying to match up volunteers where they live, firstly. So your address in the subject line. Then in the actual body of the email, your name, your home address, your mobile. Once you've done that, you will then get a reply back that will GDPR reply, and also that way you're registered as well. In time, once we have registrations all set up, and we don't know exactly when that'll be, but in time we'll then be sending out information to everyone who's registered as a street volunteer with their allocated street or part of a street, along with further instructions for them. They will then be picking up a card from PJH or outside of PJH, which they'll deliver to each house on their street allocated to them with their mobile and further instructions for what they can do for the people they're giving the cards to.
And if you want more information, they will be placing posters up in the village, and you can also visit their website. It's at overtoncares.co.uk. Now, all the details will be in the link section of our website at overton.tv, and that also goes for everything else we've talked about in the show today. Well, that's all for today. We hope to have another edition for you online at 9 Monday evening. We hope to be talking to Dr. Chilcott from the Overton surgery about the pressures that are building up in the surgery and how you can help them as the cases of this coronavirus rise. In the meantime, I'd love to thank everybody for contributing, getting this online and going within 24 hours, and for Overton Business Association, thank you very much for their support too. Have a lovely weekend. Bye for now.